So walk me through this book and how much, I guess, Caitlin Clark's, was there any cooperation, any reach out to her at all, Christine, for this book?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. She
Great.
answered 40 to 50 questions that I
Awesome.
asked her. Yeah, she's great. She's better in person than you'd hope. Yeah, what happened was right around the time actually you and I spoke, which was the Olympic snub, which, by
Yes.
the way, is a chapter title in the book, and I have even more reporting on that abysmal decision, and I continue to report it. So there's breaking news within the book on that chapter alone, as well as there's
Yes.
lots of.
Christine Brennan just absolutely destroyed the WNBA leadership on The Rich Eisen Show while discussing her new book about Caitlin Clark. She didn't pull any punches about how the league completely fumbled their golden opportunity and basically proved they weren't ready for prime time. Her comments are causing major waves across basketball media right now. Do you think Christine Brennan was too harsh on the WNBA's handling of Caitlin Clark? Or was she spot on with her criticism? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Things. But within a few weeks, I was, just early July thinking, gosh, should I maybe do a book on this? I hadn't written a book in a long time. And this has become my 8th book, 4th with Scribner. Literally 54 weeks ago, there was no book. And now we're number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. So, it shows what it shows, Rich, is the incredible power, appeal of this 23-year-old woman.
So Christine Brennan just went on The Rich Eisen Show to promote her new book about Caitlin Clark. And let me tell you, she absolutely torched the WNBA in ways that are going to make some people very uncomfortable. This veteran sports journalist, who's been covering women's sports for decades, basically laid out exactly how the league managed to screw up the biggest gift they've ever received. First, let's talk about what makes Brennan's criticism so devastating. This isn't some random blogger or social media personality taking shots at the WNBA. This is Christine Brennan, a USA Today columnist who has been fighting for women's sports coverage for over 40 years. She's been in the trenches advocating for female athletes when most media outlets couldn't care less about women's basketball.
It wouldn't have been caught dead watching women's basketball when I would be on radio shows, or you and I might be talking at various things. Guys would laugh like, "You're not covering the women's Final Four, are you? Like, why would you go to the women's Olympic gold medal game at all the Olympics I cover? What a waste of time. It's not good basketball. It's below the rim. They're rolling around on the floor. It's jump balls." These are the things I heard. I was laughed at as I would advocate the coverage of women's basketball, among all the other things that I've been able to do, men's and women's, right? Sports. And honest to goodness, to see now those guys that would have been calling into sports talk shows around the country laughing, they're the guys now buying the number 22 jerseys. They're wearing them not only to games, but to the grocery store and the gas station. They are Caitlin Clark's biggest fans, and they are the reason that these TV ratings are through the roof.
Brennan has been laughed at as I would advocate the coverage of women's basketball among all the other things that I've been able to do, men's and women's, right? Sports. She's heard all the dismissive comments about women's basketball being below the rim and not good basketball. So when someone like that starts criticizing the WNBA's handling of their biggest star, you better pay attention. The numbers that Brennan dropped on Rich Eisen's show are absolutely staggering and show just how much the WNBA fumbled this situation. She pointed out that the Indiana Fever's average home attendance last year was higher than 5 NBA teams. Let that sink in for a second. A WNBA team outdrew multiple NBA franchises because of one player. But here's where it gets really interesting. Brennan talked about how the same guys who used to mock women's basketball are now the ones buying Caitlin Clark jerseys and wearing them everywhere. They are Caitlin Clark's biggest fans. And they are the reason that these TV ratings are through the roof.
Average home attendance last year, first year of Caitlin Clark, was higher than the average home attendance of 5 NBA teams. I cannot even believe I said that sentence, and I researched it, and it's in On Her Game. Point being, this has absolutely been a sea change, the likes of which I did not envision seeing in my career. That's how big a deal. And I chronicled the whole thing, and Caitlin answered every question, tough questions, looked you in the eye, goes on with answers, goes off on a tangent, comes back and finishes the answer. I mean, she's just a delight.
This represents a complete cultural shift that the WNBA was completely unprepared for. For decades, women's basketball has struggled to gain mainstream acceptance, especially among male sports fans. Then Clark comes along and suddenly you have guys who wouldn't be caught dead watching women's basketball becoming diehard fans. That's unprecedented in the history of women's professional sports. But instead of capitalizing on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the WNBA seemed to actively work against their own interests. Brennan's book reveals just how unprepared the league was for the tsunami of attention that Clark brought with her from college. During a call with a WNBA official about Clark's impact, Brennan noted, "What was I hearing in that WNBA's official's voice? Not happiness, not anticipation, not excitement. No, it was something else." That something else was apparently anxiety and uncertainty about how to handle their newfound popularity. Think about how backwards that is. You have a league that has struggled for relevance and financial stability for nearly 3 decades, and when they finally get a player who can solve both problems, they're worried instead of excited. It's like winning the lottery and being concerned about having too much money.
And she likes Caitlin Clark. She gets it. At least I thought she got it. But when she did that, I mean, Shelton and Caitlin go back a long way because of Iowa and Ohio State through the Big Ten. And so, there's chippy play. And Caitlin Clark does not need me or you or anyone to defend her. Oh, she's not a victim. She gives it as good as she takes it. She's tough. She's strong. She's revving up the crowd. She loves it. And people love her for that. But when Marina Mabrey plowed into Caitlin Clark like a freight train, if that did not injure Caitlin Clark, as far as we know, although now she's had these 4 injuries, and the last time she missed a game was sophomore year of high school. So bizarre, absolutely bizarre what's happening. And so obviously disheartening for Caitlin Clark and so many of her fans. But when Marina Mabrey does that, you know who she's hurting at the end of the day? She's hurting Marina Mabrey and her earning potential. Because when Caitlin Clark is injured, the first time she was injured this year, Rich, she would miss 5 games. During those 5 games when she disappeared, more than half of the viewership of the WNBA, not just the Fever, but the WNBA, more than half of the viewership also disappeared. That is falling off a cliff.
The attendance and viewership numbers that Clark generates are unlike anything the WNBA has ever seen. But here's the scary part for the league. When Clark gets injured, those numbers disappear almost instantly. Brennan pointed out that when Clark missed games earlier this season, more than half of the WNBA's viewership vanished along with her. Tiger Woods, I looked it up, when he would be out of a major tournament or missing something, it would drop a little. Michael Jordan, when he went to baseball, dropped a little. Others over the years, over half of your TD-TV audience just disappears. That is devastating to the WNBA and to its financial future. This is unprecedented in professional sports. Even legendary figures like Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan never had this kind of impact on their respective leagues' viewership. When they were absent, ratings would dip, but nothing like the cliff dive that happens when Clark is out. What makes this even more damaging is that some of the physical play directed at Clark seems counterproductive to the league's own interests. Brennan specifically called out incidents like Marina Mabrey's hit on Clark, pointing out that when you injure the player responsible for driving half your viewership, you're literally hurting your own earning potential.
Tiger Woods, I looked it up. When he would be out of a major tournament or missing something, it would drop a little. Michael Jordan, when he went to baseball, dropped a little. Others over the years. Over half of your TV audience just disappears. That is devastating to the WNBA and to its financial future, and all those players with the CBA now up and they're having these negotiations. They need to realize sooner than later, not that you treat her like kid gloves, but that Caitlin is to them even more important than Tiger was to men's golf. Because men's golf had already had Arnie Jack, Byron Nelson, Sam Snead, going all the way back to Bobby Jones. It already had the commercials and the standing within the sports culture.
The financial implications are staggering when you think about it. Every game Clark misses costs the league millions in lost advertising revenue, reduced merchandise sales, and decreased ticket prices. Yet some players seem more focused on making physical statements than protecting the golden goose. Brennan's comparison to Tiger Woods is particularly apt here. Tiger Woods, golf, had already had Airy Jack, Byron Nelson, Sam Snead going all the way back to Bobby Jones. It already had the commercials and the standing within the sports culture. WNBA in our male-dominated sports world never has had that. This is a crucial point that many people miss. Golf was already established as a major sport with a rich history and commercial success before Tiger came along. He elevated it to new heights, but the foundation was already there. The WNBA never had that foundation. They've been fighting for scraps of attention and revenue for decades. Clark represents something completely different for women's basketball. She's not just elevating an already successful league, she's single-handedly creating mainstream relevance that never existed before. The responsibility that comes with that is enormous, and the WNBA has largely failed to live up to it. The racial dynamics that Brennan addresses in her book add another layer of complexity to this situation. She repeatedly returns to Clark's race and the frosty reception she got from some in the league, and questions whether the WNBA wasn't ready for all the attention. This is obviously a sensitive topic, but it's one that can't be ignored when examining why the league struggled to embrace their biggest star. The WNBA is 74% black, and Clark is a white, straight player coming into a league with a significant LGBTQ+ population. That dynamic was always going to create some tension, but the league should have been prepared to manage it. Instead, you had situations like veteran players making dismissive comments about Clark's impact, current players taking cheap shots, and a general sense that Clark needed to pay her dues before being accepted. That might be normal rookie treatment in most circumstances, but when that rookie is responsible for doubling your television ratings, maybe you adjust your approach. The Olympic snub that Brennan covers extensively in her book is another perfect example of how institutions failed to recognize Clark's unique value. Brennan has even more reporting on that abysmal decision and continues to investigate it. The fact that the player driving unprecedented interest in women's basketball was left off the Olympic team shows how disconnected decision-makers were from the reality of Clark's impact. What's particularly frustrating about all of this is that the solutions were obvious if anyone had been paying attention. Clark's popularity wasn't some mysterious phenomenon. It was clearly tied to her playing style, her college success, and her ability to connect with fans. The league could have built marketing campaigns around that, created storylines that embraced the attention, and positioned other players to benefit from the spotlight. Instead, they seem to actively resist the attention and treat Clark's popularity as something to be managed rather than celebrated. It's like being handed a winning lottery ticket and complaining about having to go to the bank to cash it. The comparison Brennan makes between Clark and other transformative athletes is illuminating. She describes Clark as very similar to Tiger Woods with golf, right? Where people who would never watch the sport now tune in to see her. But unlike golf, which was already commercially successful when Tiger arrived, the WNBA desperately needed this kind of breakthrough. The media coverage aspect that Brennan discusses is particularly interesting. She talks about how guys who used to laugh at women's basketball coverage are now the most engaged fans. That represents a fundamental shift in how women's sports are perceived in mainstream culture. But the league's response to increased media attention has been problematic. Instead of embracing the scrutiny and using it to promote the sport, they've often been defensive and hostile. The whole Dejanai Carrington controversy that Brennan was involved in is a perfect example. When Brennan asked legitimate journalistic questions about whether a hit on Clark was intentional, the WNBA Players Association posted a lengthy statement calling for her media credentials to be revoked. This kind of response shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how professional sports work. In every other major league, players expect to be asked tough questions about controversial plays. That's part of being a professional athlete. The fact that the WNBA Players Association tried to silence a veteran journalist for doing her job shows how unprepared they were for big league scrutiny. What makes this even more ridiculous is that Brennan has been one of the strongest advocates for women's sports throughout her career. As Jake Tapper noted, those are horrible blights on our culture that you have been fighting against for decades. If you're going to attack someone who has spent 40 years advocating for female athletes, you better have your facts straight. The business implications of all these missteps are enormous. Clark's popularity has created opportunities for revenue growth that the WNBA has never had before. Sponsorship deals, television contracts, merchandise sales, and ticket prices have all increased dramatically because of her presence. But that growth is fragile and dependent on Clark staying healthy and engaged. Every controversy, every injury, every sign that the league doesn't appreciate her value puts that growth at risk. The recent injuries that have kept Clark out of multiple games this season show just how quickly that momentum can disappear. Brennan's point about Clark being more than a basketball player is crucial here. She's become a cultural phenomenon that transcends sports. The fact that guys are wearing her jersey to grocery stores shows that her appeal goes far beyond traditional basketball fans. This kind of crossover appeal is incredibly rare in professional sports. You can count on one hand the number of athletes who have achieved this level of cultural relevance. The WNBA had lightning in a bottle and largely wasted it because they were too worried about traditional power structures and internal politics. The financial numbers that Brennan cites are staggering when you consider the WNBA's historical struggles. A league that has never turned a profit suddenly has a player whose presence can guarantee sellouts and premium television ratings. That's the kind of transformation that sports leagues dream about. But instead of building their entire marketing strategy around Clark and using her popularity to elevate other players, the league seemed to treat her success as an inconvenience. They wanted the benefits of her popularity without acknowledging what made her special. The international comparison that could be made here is interesting too. Other women's sports leagues around the world would kill for a player with Clark's impact. The fact that the WNBA had that and still managed to create unnecessary controversy shows a fundamental failure of leadership. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert comes in for particular criticism in Brennan's comments. Brennan notes how Engelbert has trouble talking about Caitlin Clark, or if she's asked about Caitlin, she'll say Caitlin and Angel. Well, she wasn't asked about Angel. This kind of deflection shows an inability to recognize and capitalize on your biggest asset. The CBA negotiations that are happening now make all of this even more relevant. Players are asking for more money and better working conditions, but they're doing so while actively undermining the one person most responsible for increased league revenue. It's like employees demanding raises while criticizing the company's best salesperson. What's really sad about all of this is that Clark herself has handled everything with remarkable professionalism. Despite taking cheap shots, being excluded from Team USA, and dealing with constant controversy, she's continued to perform at an elite level and represent the league positively. As former teammate Kate Martin noted in Brennan's book, she would never say a bad word about anybody, and she would never make excuses for herself, and that's what makes her great. Clark has been the perfect ambassador for women's basketball, and the league has largely failed to support her. The long-term implications of all these missteps could be devastating for the WNBA. Clark won't play forever, and the window for capitalizing on her popularity is limited. If the league continues to treat their biggest star as a problem to be managed rather than an asset to be celebrated, they risk losing the momentum that took decades to build. Brennan's book and her media appearances serve as a wake-up call for anyone who cares about women's basketball. The WNBA has been handed the keys to mainstream relevance, but they need to learn how to drive the car before it's too late. Christine Brennan just exposed exactly how the WNBA fumbled the biggest opportunity in women's sports history. Her criticism of the league's leadership and handling of Caitlin Clark should be required reading for anyone who wants to understand this mess. The numbers don't lie, and neither does Brennan. Like and subscribe for more sports reality checks.